Hi guys, welcome to Snakes and Adders. This is the latest episode now in our Advanced series, and it's probably one of the most requested and sought after episodes that we've done. This episode is on green tree pythons, Morelia viridis. This stunning chap here is a Manokwari male, just a young boy. It's sod's law. I wanted to get him out where he was nice and asleep and he'd sit on his branch nice and quiet and I could do the video without problems. Instead he's decided to wake up and have a mooch round and a look around. So this perch may end up going if he voluntarily crawls onto me. The importance of that I will discuss later. So green tree python, first described in 1872 as Python viridis by German naturalist Hermann Schlegel. Perhaps most famously known for particularly stunning venomous snake species that hopkeepers hold dear, which was named in honour of him, which was Bothriechis schlegeli, or the eyelash viper. Changed to Chondropython azureus by Meyer in 1874, then changed to Chondropython pulcher by Sauvage in 1878, changed to Chondropython azureus by W.Peters Doria in 1878, changed to Chondropython viridis by Boulenger in 1893. Can we see a pattern forming? Remained as Chondropython viridis according to Kinghorn in 1928. Remained as Chondropython viridis according to Mc Dowell in 1975, changed to Morelia viridis by Underwood Stimson in 1990, changed to Chondropython viridis by Cogger in 1992, and changed back to Morelia viridis by Kluge in 1993. As you can see, there's been some discord and back and forth on the Latin names. Do I believe that it's in its final place? No. There has been some taxonomic changes. We'll return to taxonomy later. The snake was originally described by two holotype specimens that were collected in the Aru Islands, and naturally the green tree python occurs in Indonesia, including Misul, Salawati, Aru Islands, the Shutan Islands, which are Biak and Yapen mainly, West Papua or Irian Jaya as a lot of people know it, Papua New Guinea and Queensland on the east coast of the Cape York Peninsula. As a result of the holotype specimens, type locality was given as the Aru Islands. Depending on locality variations and seasonal dryness can occur, temperatures are relatively stable annually, but it's the humidity levels that will change. All of the information I quote, as always, is easily sourced on Google by putting in climograph for Jayapura, Port Moresby, wherever you want it to be. So I picked a region in the north of the range, which was Jayapura, and then a region in the south of the range to offer comparison. For example, the northern part of the range in Jayapura is consistently wetter than the southwest regions of Papua New Guinea, Port Moresby, with a peak wet season of 320 millimetres in March compared to a peak in February of 200 millilitres in Port Moresby. The dry season trough of 125 millimetres in July in Jayapura compared to only 30 millimetres in Port Moresby in July, showing that the animals across the range will experience a difference in humidity and moisture levels. Now, across that range we're then moving much further to the west. We've gone to the east with Port Moresby, we're moving further south towards the Australian mainland in Aru. And then obviously we're on the Australian mainland in the Queensland region. So, you know, to say that there is some variability in their natural range would be true. Hello. That isn't where the differences end. These animals are highly variable. You're going to hear the word locality, type, colours. All of these things are bloody interchangeable. They're a nightmare and a cause for much contention. Greg Maxwell, who wrote More Complete Conjure, which a lot of people use as the Bible, basically said unless you were there and you put it in the bag at the port of export, you don't know where the animal's from. What we have are accepted types or accepted patterns, colours or combinations thereof. The most commonly accepted locales would include the Aru Islands. They're off the southwest coast of West Papua. These snakes generally reach between 5.5 and 6 feet long. They are elegant snakes. They have white dorsal speckling, blue dotting and bluing to the ventrum and labial lip scales. Then there's Biak Island off the northwest northwest Papua between Birdhead Peninsula and on the west, and Jayapura to the east. North of Yapen Island, these animals are 6 foot, heavy-set, dragon-faced and brutish facially. They are highly variable locale, and they retain different amounts of yellow, white and blue as they grow. So a lot of the biaks will retain a yellow bar across the eyes or a patch on the snout, and this is even into adulthood. A yellow patch can be retained, and there are high yellow lines of biak. Yapen Island, due south of Biak Island between Birdhead Peninsula to the west and Jayapura to the east. Not quite as large as the biaks, but with the same flared nostrils and angry face. White rosettes of scale scattered all over the body that give it a splashed with paint look. So imagine that you've had dipped a paintbrush in gloss and just gone and flicked it. You'll end up with these speckles all over the snake. Yapens are incredibly attractive but highly variable. Some are far prettier than others, depending on the amount of white or frosting that's present on the snake as an adult. Sarong and Manokwari. This is a Manokwari, so you've got a live example here. On the west and east coasts respectively of the Birdhead Peninsula, in the northwest of West Papua or Irian Jaya, noticeably smaller than the other locales discussed so far, usually 4 feet, although females exceptionally may reach 5 feet in length. Small cherubic faces and chunky body frame, loads of retained blue in the form of a dorsal stripe and triangles with occasional yellow and white flecks also. Jayapura, northern coast of West Papua on the West Papua and Papua New Guinea border, relatively slender, between 4.5 and 5 feet in length. Used to come in as plain green animals, a little boring to look at, but that's compared to other localities. The problem is that Jayapuras are described as relatively plain Jane and solid green. In recent years, the ones that have been coming through have had a lot more blue, which is more reminiscent of the Cyclops and other locales. Cyclops or Cyclops Mountain, just south of Jayapura. Similar blue lattice work to the sarongs, but intricate. Very pretty. Jayapura is now coming through with more of these telltale colours. Merauke, southern coast of Irian Jaya near Papuan border. Sought after, some animals stripe out, and the super stripe originated there, which is very expensive and very much sought after. Kafiao Island, part of the Raja Ampat group of islands on the far west of the range, off the coast of Sarong, the land of the Canaries. Truly sought after. Unfortunately, not all animals do remain pure yellow, but there is a population, or a certain proportion of the population, that remain yellow into adulthood. It is perfectly reasonable to assume that quite a few have been sold unscrupulously by certain dealers that have then greened out, which may well then not be Kafiaos. There may well have been more research since, but my speciality isn't with Kafiaos. What we'll do now is I've arranged some slides. Me and Paul have been very fortunate at Snakes and Adders over probably the last 10 to 15 years, and we've had around 250 green trees of various localities come through. What this gives us a unique opportunity to do is to be able to basically have a little slideshow and show you some of the natural variation that occurs with these snakes. So I'll show you the first two, which will be snakes of the Birdhead Peninsula and snakes of the Shooten Islands. So snakes of the Birdhead Peninsula will cover Manokwari and Sarong. Snakes of the Shooten Islands will include animals of biak and yapen that we have had over the years. And then later on we shall cover the other northern localities and then the southern localities, including Maruk and Aru Island. This way we can split it up. You may have to come back to the slides to have a look. I didn't want to just have a massive expanse of slides in the centre, but it's important because we're going to show you the variability. In part 2, after the slides, I'm going to discuss a conversation I sat down and had with Paul, who is far more experienced with green trees than me, and some of his tips garnered from years of breeding them, which date right back to 1985. So hopefully you'll hang around for part 2. Cheers guys. Hi guys, welcome back to part 2. So you've just seen the slides for the Birdhead Peninsula and the Shooting Islands, which was Yapen and Biak. You will have already seen just how variable these snakes are just from those two locality groups. After we've finished part 2, you're going to see the next two sets of slides, which is going to be for the other northern localities and for the southern localities, including Manokwari and Aru Island. So yeah, hopefully this paints a picture. Part of the joy of working with somebody as experienced as Paul is I get to do mini interviews with him on occasion in preparation for these videos. No other video have I taken more seriously, and therefore sitting Paul down and saying to him, come on, give me the skinny on the way that you do all stuff. You've produced hundreds of babies over the years with the green trees. What tricks, tips, things have you managed to do? Bearing in mind that he started his career with the green trees in 1985, first bred them in about 1987, 1988. So at which point he is old school. Some of the stuff that he used to go through, he says it was a different time. It was spit and sawdust. We had to sort of just work stuff out as we went. But they did it, they cracked it. So these were his notes, which I feel are important to add, and they add to the video. Always remember, these are our opinions, and you know, you're welcome to have your own. Part of keeping an advanced species means that you are advanced enough to be able to make your own decisions, to solve your own problems, to do your own research, to create your own action plan for the maintenance and husbandry of a species. It is not down to some bloke on YouTube or on Facebook to tell you exactly how to keep an advanced species. It kind of, by definition of your own voluntary acceptance of an advanced species that you want to keep, you know what you're doing. This is more, shall we say, a aspirational video for people wanting to maybe one day get there. And if it helps some people new to green trees that may have had issues, then we've served our purpose as far as I'm aware. But like we said, there are different ways to skin a cat. So Paul said that invariably he found that Arus easiest to work with. Arus, which are from the south and quite a large locale at around 6 feet when fully grown, had the right combination of willingness to feed, but laid back enough that you were able to work around them without getting battered or bitten, which Biaks and Yapens are going to be less likely to let you do. Biaks, whilst they are willing to feed, also lash out, and the problem that we've then got is if they lash out and they hit tongues or they hit branches, then there's issues that arise from that, which would include respiratory infections, mouth rot, and all sorts of things. Sarongs and Manokwaris are tiny as babies. This is a young Manokwari, but by no means neonatal. It's already grown on. They are tiny when born. And they are the biggest pain to get going. Once established, they're fine. This chap took a fuzzy yesterday, no dramas. But to begin with, they're the finickiest and the most work. As far as getting them going is concerned, Paul says that using chick fluff to scent the pinks or the fluffs, or even for really small youngsters such as the Sarongs and Manokwaris, chick thighs with the flesh exposed, offered on tongues, and they would be taken. Neonates and adults are fed at night for best results, and he would spray them 5 to 10 minutes before feeding attempts, as this seemed to help. Whether it was to wake them up, he doesn't know, but it just seemed to make the efforts more fruitful. Patience is a virtue, and Paul says through gritted teeth the amount of nights that he's lost sat trying to get neonatal green trees feeding for 4 and 5 hours at a time, he doesn't want to relive. They can be a snake that's infinitely frustrating as tiddlers. Like I said, we're not going to continue to have that problem as they get older and more developed, but certainly as youngsters, Christ, they can make you work. So patience, definitely a virtue. Don't get overly frustrated. Make sure your animal's well established. Make sure it's been feeding, preferably even see it feed. Cycling, in his opinion, for breeding is a bit of a moot point. Whilst the warm end was controlled via a thermostat, DL1MEs by microclimate were his stat of choice. In truth, they're probably still mine and Paul's stat of choice. I realise there's the digital revolution, but when you're 25 years into knowing how to do it with a lux meter controlled thermostat, then you know, that's what you stick to. He said that the thermostat controlled the warm end, but through the natural British cycle we are going to get a cooler cool end. The day-night cycle was altered naturally because we were obviously on British light cycle, so we're going to have a longer night, which is invariably then cooler. So this is all done automatically, even though we've got a thermostatically controlled basking spot. The circadian rhythms and the day-night cycle are altered as well. We can introduce extra sprays to raise the humidity, and the longer cooler nights and the presence of more low pressure barometric pressure fronts coming through are the triggers which would be the precursor for wet season where they're from. So we're going to use the barometric pressure and nature to do our job for us, and I don't suppose that North America would be any different in this regard. Breeding trials would also happen assuming that they had not been bred already during electrical storms where the windows were opened and that charged low pressure air was allowed in. During these trials they were sprayed with cool water. Paul says it was a trick that he was told. He can't remember for the life of him who told him. Anyway, it worked wonders for the trials, with multiple males successfully copulating as a result. To encourage breeding of reticent males, sparring would sometimes be used to battle off the males for a female's attention. It was feared that if biting could occur, male skins were saved and tied in plastic bags to be draped throughout the vivariums at later points to give the view to stimulating a male to breed before he lost his chance, perceived by another male being in the tank with the shed skin. It is worth saying that sparring and battling we know to be an issue. We know that bites are perfectly possible. Please remember, at the point of me giving this advice and me and Paul talking, this is based around husbandry techniques from 1985 to about 1999, so things have come along. Also, egg laying sites were elevated. Paul would use budgie boxes, and it was with sphagnum moss inside. The egg laying site was only placed inside the vivarium post ovulation, which is when the females swell up once the breeding efforts have started, and it shows the maturation of the ova and the thickening of the walls. So that's where we get this sort of blown up balloon sort of effect on the last two-thirds of the snake's body. So the egg laying sites would only go in once that ovulation and swelling had been seen. Incubation technique was a rudimentary polystyrene box, exactly the same as we still use today in the back of snakes and adders. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. A plastic shoebox container, old schoolers will know the type, clear hard plastic. We'd use a soldering iron to melt some 2-3 milli holes, probably 3 per side, none in the lid, and then there would be a base mix of dampened vermiculite, which would be the bottom probably 2 inch and then 1 inch around the edges of the box, and that shallow hollow in the center would be filled with dry perlite, and the eggs would then be sat onto the perlite. So these guys would lay their eggs in the boughs of trees. They would never really be sunk the way that we sink other python eggs half down into the substrate, and green tree pythons eggs are notorious for rotting, so that's why they were sat on top of the perlite. The incubation temperature used was 31 degrees Celsius, and he's a firm believer that the incubator should use a good thermostat, so a pulcher, a dimmer, no on-off stats, and heat pad was the source in the ceiling of the box, so that the air was warmed rather than heating through and creating condensation, again, which would rot and kill your eggs. First litters off females could be rough, but back then they were imported animals and their true age was hard to determine. They were potentially, Paul quite selflessly admits, he just says, we maybe bred them too soon. Once we established them, got them going, they grew well, they grew quick, and once we've reached quote sizes of 4, 5, 5.5 feet, we're thinking, yeah, bang on, Sam, we'll go for it. He's put them in. The patchy fertility was improved with subsequent litters. The biggest litter that you can recall was from a yapping female of 31 eggs. Average clutch sizes over the years were between 20 and 24 eggs. His animals were fed and large, which may account for the litter size. Going back to the age thing, we know now potentially that there is great benefit to giving a female a 4th or even 5th season before we try breeding them. Green tree pythons feed regularly, they turn their food round, and they grow at quite a rapid rate, and as such people are fooled into thinking they're mature just because they're up to size, and that is not the case. And you would reap great benefits from giving them that 4th or 5th season to mature off, and then you probably find that the fecundancy and fertility of the litters would be increased. There was no particular special treatment of babies. They were maintained in single-tier glass-fronted racking systems, which helped to warm the air. So rather than an open rack, they had sliding glass doors. Again, using the hard plastic shoe boxes with 2 of these rods, thinner than this though probably, canes more than likely, across at angles. The heat pad was at the back of the rack, and what the animal could do could then move side to side to control and thermoregulate its temperature along a flat plane rather than a vertical plane. We'll get to Viv design later on, but this was how Paul was doing it to establish and raise the babies. Most common ailments were as a result of striking out. The biggest proponents of this were the BIACs. I would certainly concur with that over my experiences as well. RI would occur, which is respiratory infection like a pneumonia, bubbles and snot and blowed out throats and all the rest of it, and that is as a result of broken teeth in the gum lining, swelling up, pus being there, the infection spreading, going down the throat, and therefore we would use iodine mouthwashes, remove as much of the pus as possible. We'd also get some fine tiny tweezers, remove any broken teeth parts that we could find, and then we would also use, back then it was Baytril. The Baytril was enrofloxacin. I'm not going to give dosages, it's not appropriate, but nowadays Fortum's used because it doesn't scar the same way Baytril does, and that's ceftazidime, so that's used nowadays. Also, Paul didn't particularly find shedding to be an issue. The baby boxes retained humidity well, and generally the snakes shed fine. The skin, of course, is much thinner on babies, and care should be taken not to allow them to dry out too much. That's slightly more. Certain people will use different containers. If the airflow is too high, then the humidity will disappear too quick. If the airflow is too low, then it'll stagnate and potentially cause bacterial flourishes. But I know that Paul is anal when it comes to cleaning, so it has to be done regularly. So he'll have not had those flushes, that's why he's not had the problems. So expect that you maybe need to change the paper or whatever it is you're keeping in the bottom that you keep damp in your shoe boxes while you're growing the babies on. You might need to clean that out more regularly, because if we're going to arrest airflow to create humidity to help them shed their skin and help them keep them breathing right, then what we don't want is bacterial problems as well. So there's a balancing act to strike. Hey, welcome to advanced keeping. So I'm going to do the next set of slides, which is for the other northern locales, which is Jayapura, Cyclops Mountain, Nabia and Lira, and then the southern localities, which would be Merauke and Aru Island. When we come back, we'll just do the conclusions, draw it all together, and hopefully you're a bit richer for the video. Cheers. part 3. You've just watched another set of slides, and you will now be completely confused because there's so much variation. Absolutely. This is where the problem comes from. This is where the problems start. This is a little biac molding now. So you can see the natural variation is crazy. And there'll be ones in the pictures that we have shown you that we have been sent as biac, as sarong, as Manokwari, as whatever, that looks like something else. And you're right. The problem is that there's no lockdown way of knowing, guaranteeing that they are what they are. So what people do generally is breed for colour and for type. So if they breed for blue, they'll use Manokwari, sarong, Cyclops. If they're breeding for white, they use Merauke, they use Aru, they might use Yapen. Retained yellow, there's going to be biac in there. You see how this works? So this is what they're doing. Earlier in the video I made reference to taxonomy and the arguments going on and all the rest of it and how we'd revisit it. The two of the names that have been argued about for years, azureus and viridis, they're back and now they've been split. The northern population is azureus, the southern population is viridis. The holotype Aru Island is retained the viridis name along with Merauke and anything south of the Wamena Highlands on mountain range on Irian Jaya. Everything north of there. So Lyra, Nabia, Cyclops, Jayapura, Sarong, Manokwari, Kafiao, Biak, Yapen and Arfak, they are all azureus. Argument goes, some of the northern range are accepted as having red babies as well as yellow babies, and the southern population generally it's just yellow babies, and there's all this mitochondrial and DNA research that shows them to be two distinct populations. So whereas previously we looked at hybridizing localities, actually according to science now we are hybridizing species, so that is worth bearing in mind. If you're breeding for colour and you're selling a colour, fine, but if it's a locality that you want to stick to, then you may need to work slightly harder to make sure that you keep them pure. Why did I say earlier on that I would only allow the snake to crawl on me if it voluntarily came? Is because it has a prehensile tail that holds on very tightly to branches, and it's like a ratchet tight system that holds on tight, and it's very easy with big, stupid, clumsy hands like mine to damage the linkages that create the tail. This can lead to prolapses and kinking. It's a real problem. Snakes and adders in no way endorses the handling of green tree pythons. Like I said, if it voluntarily crawls onto me, that's one thing. Its tail's relaxed and it's its choice. I would not be pulling a green tree off a perch. Just wouldn't do it. I don't like doing it. So yeah, I am anti-handling of green trees. I do not think it's necessary. I think that it's an ornamental species and it should stay that way. With regards to food and food intake, actually these are non-problematic. They get convoluted with emerald tree boas, which are problematic, and there was always this fear that they're going to prolapse if you feed them well. It's a load of crap. That you can feed these well, they'll grow quick, they develop fast, they gain weight well, and they poo regularly as well. If you allow them to become bone dry, then you maybe run the risk of constipation and cause yourself problems that way. But by definition of being an advanced keeper, that shouldn't really be a problem. You're keeping an advanced level snake. You need to make sure that you're ready for this stuff. It's not just a walk in the park. It is an animal that will challenge you in ways that you didn't know were possible. And you need to be ready for that stuff. You need to have cut your teeth on other things. It's okay being a bit cocksure and being confident. When that spills over into arrogance, as the green tree community in the UK has seen with certain keepers, not liking what they've been told and then starting their own groups to perpetuate their crap, we're up against it. It's a shame because green trees are amazing. There is an amazing community surrounding green trees. The UK breeders are great, willing to share advice, maybe a little, what's the word, precious about the animals they produce, which is fine. It's their right. They tell us how much better they are than everything else, but they're producing these animals, so that was always going to be the case. And also, the demand always outstrips supply, so until they start producing more at reasonable prices, then people will still import the F2 generation captive bred from Indo, such as our animals, which have always fared and done fine, and we've never had an issue with them. And interestingly, a lot of these UK breeders have bought them from us in the past from those origins, so it was okay for them but not okay for the people that they sell to. But it is what it is. It's interesting. this hobby is a political minefield at the best of times. But I got no beef with them, you know, they're protecting their own interests, it's all good. The green trees are amazing snakes, so variable. There's a very good reason why people put them at the top of their dream list. You really are struggling to find anything that looks better as a display species. They're fabulous. So just take your time, do not be in a rush, make sure that you're well researched. With regards to orientation of vivariums, you're an advanced level keeper, do your research, read your Greg Maxwell, read other people. Some people go for a terrestrial viv where they can move side to side on bows. This is a bow, an example of a bow, and they can move side to side. Or people provide multiple bows in an arboreal viv and they move up and down to control that. So that's kind of your choice. It's a prerequisite to have a reliable thermostat that controls the temperature correctly. You need to be aware of the amount of airflow. Whilst there does need to be airflow, you also need to be able to arrest it at the point of shedding so that you can raise humidity and then allow it to peter out throughout the day. And humidity naturally raises itself again at night as things start to cool down. So we would have a thermostat with a day-night cycle. So these are all things for you to bear in mind. We're not here to teach you how to reinvent the wheel. This is an advanced level video. So you're not an idiot, you're not a beginner. Get off your arse, do your research, do it properly, look at your climographs, look at where the animal's country of origin is, be able to create the biome that you've got, and just go from there. Enjoy them, that's the main thing. I hope you've enjoyed the video. It has been a lot of work. We're not going to make a habit of doing these many sort of break-offs, but it's just such a complex one, and I know that people are just gunning to try and pull us down about it. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll keep the videos coming, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.